Difficult. Women.
Hello.
Oh, hey.
I didn't see you there. Oh my goodness.
It startled me.
Oh my God. It scared me.
Been hiding in the corner.
That's how we pod. Katie's in the corner behind a chair with a microphone.
Whenever it's time, whenever I feel like it's time, I just
let her out.
Just like,
She's my elf on the shelf. Welcome. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, I'm Marie.
I'm Katie. And this is... Ooh,
what?
What is it?
Who?
Ooh.
I don't know. What time is it?
It's difficult
Women time. Oh my God. It's always difficult women time, baby.
As far as I'm concerned.
We're also in the comedy band Reformed Whores. If you want to check us out on Spotify, if you've ever heard of it.
It's very fun.
What's very fun? Spotify or the band?
Both. I'm into it. I was actually re-listening to our albums the other day, like from beginning to end, because they're like, you may not know this, you guys, because if you haven't listened to the whole album, but they are concept albums.
Yep, 2 concepts.
So there's like story, like a plot and everything. I don't know. I think they're brilliant, but I was like, this is genius. We should be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for sure. Tomorrow.
I'm so proud. Those are we don't have babies, but I kind of feel like I do because we have 2 albums.
Totally. Yeah. I don't disagree. The other thing is, I think we're due for a new album. But
that's right, baby. I've already been thinking of what the fuck to call it.
Oh, good.
We have such genius. If you don't know, our first album,
it's called Ladies Don't Spit.
Songs that leave a good taste in your mouth. I almost forgot.
Nope,
I forgot my baby's name.
Yeah. And the other one's called Don't Beat Around the Bush.
Songs that hit the spot.
I think those are genius.
People
think they're jokes. They're not even jokes. They're just
they're real. True. Yeah, those are the names of our albums. So listen to them if you will.
And the third one's going to be called We Give Up.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Love it.
Please
love and life.
Nobody buys albums anymore. That's going to be our third album.
That's true. Oh my God. I did try to do like spring cleaning in the winter the other day, cleaning out my closet. I found a whole other box of koozies.
Oh, good, actually.
Big box of koozies, folks. Reformed Horse koozies. They're only $5, guys.
Yeah.
You can send us an email and we will send you one. Yeah. If you pay. Yeah. I didn't include that, but Venmo us or whatever. But then also, just so many more CDs. It's like,
I was wondering about that. Which ones?
Just everything. We got
so many. We have so many CDs.
And some old shirts. The screen. No. They're all fucked up. Like the ones.
Oh, right.
So when we first started the band, we of course needed merchandise. So Katie and I, the whores that we are, cheap little whores, we went to Koreatown here in New York. I was so proud of us for finding these t-shirts for $2 each. But the thing was, you had to go to the warehouse in Midtown. Get them. So we would buy hundreds of shirts
in plastic bags,
then schlep them back to upstairs my apartment. Then I'd have to bring them downstairs, wash them, then bring them back, and then we silk screen them ourselves.
Yeah,
it was insane.
Bad idea. But it was
anyway. So I have like 10 guys. If you want one,
they're all fucked up, but they are originals. They were our
They're the ones
shirts.
that we fucked up on.
Yeah,
because we also had to learn how to silk screen. Which we did from YouTube.
Oh God, I don't know if that was a good idea, but we did it.
We did it. Also, so anyway, I found all
this stuff. If nobody wants them, we could just donate them, and some poor schmuck can be wearing these crappy Reformed Horse shirts.
Anyway, so you two can be in a band.
Yeah. And if anyone knows where we can recycle CDs, just let me know. I would love to know how to get rid of those.
To make money from.
Or just dispose of them in a eco-friendly kind of way. Yeah. Or if you want to buy one, that's even better. But anyway, side
What? We got an email.
Oh, yes, we did.
Yay!
It's so exciting. We love emails. You can always email us at difficultwomenpodcast@gmail.com. And that's exactly what Charlotte did the other day. And Charlotte wrote, "Hey, Difficult Women, love the podcast." And she says, "I'm getting in touch to share an experience that happened to me recently and to hear your thoughts. I was staying in an unfamiliar state/city overnight whilst waiting for my flight back the next day after a trip. I went to the supermarket just to pick up a few things. Then when I was leaving and walking back, I had a guy heckle me. He was just asking about where I was going or something, so naturally I ignored him. He then said something like, "Why didn't you say hi?" And I continued to walk and ignore him. The guy got into his car and started driving, but then he passed me slowly and continued to shout out at the car. Again, I continued to ignore him. Again, a minute or so later, he shouted out the car at me. At this point, I was getting a bit nervous, so I pretended to be on a phone call. Then about halfway back to my hotel, he passed me again and again shouted something about, "Why don't you say hi? So rude." Then I got pretty freaked out and scared he was going to follow me. He didn't, but I was looking over my shoulder the whole time, and I was on my way back and feeling paranoid a while afterwards too. I then got super mad that he would think that it's okay to act in this way and to expect me to respond. Like most other women, I've had guys shout at me before, but not to this extent or ever felt scared or this mad from it. So I wanted to know both of your experiences of this. Do you shout back or do you ignore? I wanted to yell at this guy, but being in an unfamiliar area, I was feeling pretty unconfident. It makes me so mad that this kind of behavior is deemed acceptable. Days later, I'm still feeling creeped out by this guy. Would be great to hear your thoughts and this topic discussed. Thanks.
That breaks my heart.
Charlotte. Oh, I mean,
it's just so
the
saddening.
first thing that comes to mind when I hear this story and is that thing that just came out about that young woman. I think she was a college student. She was walking to her car and a guy said something like "smile" or "hey, pretty lady," and then she ignored him, and then he raped and murdered her. And this just happened.
Oh, I didn't know
recently.
that.
Mm-hmm. And it brings up the point that as I'm rereading this email.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know. She's like, should I respond? Do I not respond? She tried to, she ignored him. And then in Charlotte's case, he then went way out of his way to go kind of chase her down and scream at her. And she was lucky that it was just that, I suppose,
right.
Because in this other young woman's case, he murdered her. So you can ask us, sure, what do you do? But the truth is, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. Sometimes you're safer if you say something. Sometimes you're safer if you don't. But how do you know the difference?
Mm-hmm.
And what I would really like to hear from some men out there to say, what are you surprised by these stories? Because this stuff happens every single day to us, and women across the world are having to deal with this kind of stuff every single day, and it's scary. And you wonder why women get scared walking home at night. It's unacceptable. And that I would love to talk to that guy that Charlotte was dealing with to be like, what do you think you deserve?
Right. Why do you feel ownership over this stranger?
Why do you think she owes you anything? It's mind-boggling to me. It wouldn't occur to me to try to say hi to some guy on the subway, and then if he ignored me, to just start following him and making him feel threatened and screaming at him. I mean, that would be insane. I would be considered insane if I did that.
You'd be a crazy, difficult woman.
I'd be a crazy woman. And I would legitimately be crazy. Don't do that. That's crazy.
Right.
But then these guys, they do it, and that seems sort of normal in a weird way, that they're that they should be mad about that. And that guy probably went home and he was mad that she didn't say anything. He's
probably mad the rest of the week. Yeah.
But then, or he forgot about it, doesn't care, or whatever. But where she now feels threatened, and that she has to worry the next time any guy talks to her again. That's is this guy going to follow me home? It's really not okay.
Right.
And that's another reason why people get so bent out of shape about if I tell you to smile, what's the big deal? It's because we do not know how far this is going to go when it happens. When some stranger says to me, "Hey, pretty," or "smile," or whatever, we all tense up.
You can't win.
And you cannot win.
Yeah, cannot win. Just for advice, I was like, I really don't know what to say or how to give advice. I know that personally, a couple years ago, and this is not good either. This is not good advice, but personally, several years ago, I just started during the day, not at night, but during the day, I always wear my earbuds. In New York City, I always wear my earbuds. When I'm out on the street, especially when I run in my neighborhood, I listen to music because I have learned that if I don't, it's just unbearable, the stuff that people are saying to me. So at least now I can just drown it out, and then if they get angry, I have no idea. But that's not a good way to do it, because that could be
they could come sneak up behind you, or something,
right. But I mean, and then also sometimes I do turn them off when I feel danger or something, and then I leave them in, and then listen to what's happening.
Yeah. Here's the God honest truth: the at the end of the day, there is not a damn thing a woman can do in those situations. And all this effort we put into trying to help each other out and give each other advice, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because that's not the problem.
Right. That's not the problem.
Charlotte didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
She didn't do a single thing wrong.
Right.
And now here we are trying to debate, like, what should she have done differently? Or what could she do?
Right.
Nothing. There's nothing.
Right.
And so the conversation is not about what we do. It's
women,
about men changing their behavior.
Right.
And it starts with this catcalling. And that's why catcalling is such a big fucking deal. And it makes me so angry. Because we don't know. We don't. And now everybody's like walking around with guns and shit too. So you just don't know.
You just don't know.
So.
And especially, I mean, the scariest part of that story is that she was on foot and he had a car. So like he started following her.
Was she in? I guess I didn't know if she was walking or in a car.
Oh, I don't know. I pictured her.
Yeah, I pictured her in a car, but either way.
Oh,
but if she, if she was walking and he was in a car.
Yeah, that's what I envisioned.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. But yeah,
car
he's really in. Yeah, that's really scary. Maybe that is how it went down.
I don't know.
That's really
just so
scary.
Terrifying. This should not.
I'm just done. I mean, just like so tired of this.
Right.
You know. Anyway, so I'm so sorry that happened to you, Charlotte. That shit has definitely happened to me. I know I've had scary moments where people are following me. We had that one guy, and we talk about this sometimes, but there was that guy in Mississippi who, like, we were just driving down the street and he was kind of playing chase with us in the car, which was dangerous and scary anyway. And then finally he kept like pulling in front of us and slowing down. And then we'd pass him because he was going so slow. And then he'd speed up and then try to tailgate you. So then you'd slow down so he could get around. And then he'd slow down. He kept playing this game, which was dangerous anyway. And then finally he like sped up past us, pulled up, stopped in front of the exit. So he was blocking traffic if there had been any, but we're in Mississippi. But and then as we're passing him, he opened his car door and then he wasn't wearing pants. And he just
the dick wagger of Mississippi.
Oh my God, he had his dick out and he's like wagging it at us. And you knew he also took off his license plate. So you knew he just did this for fun or whatever. But like that's, you know, that's not even the worst story. I mean, that kind of made us laugh. But although it was scary, I mean, it was awful.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it definitely riled me up because driving-wise, I was just like, what is happening? Who is this person? And he was just laughing and getting such a kick out of it, of bringing us terror. I mean, that's just...
No, that's so fucked up.
Yeah.
It's like so fucked up.
The fact of that story is, you know, I never saw his dick, though.
Oh, I saw it.
Yeah, I know you did.
Oh, I saw it.
But I was driving and then I saw that he pulled off and I was like, oh my God, what is he doing? And I looked back to the road and then you're like, oh my God, he's wagging his dick. And when I looked over, we had passed him. So I missed seeing... I mean,
it was not worth seeing. It like haunts me in my dreams.
It's like that one dick I didn't get to see.
Disgusting. No. It's also such a jarring thing to see a grown man,
and he had his boots on. I do remember.
Yeah, he had his boots on. He had his shirt on, and then he just had nothing on, like no
like Winnie the Pooh.
No pants.
He was Winnie the Poohing it.
God, gross.
God.
Anyway,
women. Wow, we really have to go through so much. It's great. Yeah, it's so fun.
It sucks.
You know what's fun?
What is fun?
The Bible. My segue.
That's a pretty good segue.
I'm so good at this. I'm excited to talk about this today.
Too.
It's fascinating. Katie came to me last week and said, you know what we've never discussed is women in the Bible.
And women portrayals
yes,
of
they're
women in the Bible.
Yes.
So the reason why it came up in my mind, why it occurred to me as a thing to talk about, was I have a friend who's a pastor. I think she's mostly like a youth minister, but she's a pastor. And I did summer stock with her years ago, and
and now she's a pastor.
And now she's a pastor.
Was she then? No,
she was definitely religious. I mean, she always has been, very religious. And I follow her still on Instagram, and I really love it. I'm not particularly religious at this point in my life. I did go to church and things growing up, but I don't consider myself Christian anymore, really. But she is very much so, and I love what she's doing. She's quite liberal, but she very much speaks the word of Jesus, and she really promotes this original sort of love everybody and that message. And I just love what she's doing. But so she had posted this article, and I was trying to find it, and it was just too far away. I couldn't find it. But the article kind of blew my mind because it was talking about how there was some theological studies that had been done. There's constantly people are studying the Bible. It's just like a nonstop thing that's always happening. And this theologian had found a version of some scripture that was an old, or really a translation of some scripture that was old, very, very old, and had realized that it had been mistranslated, and it was about Mary Magdalene, and during the sort of the disciple dinner and all that stuff. And when they were talking about Mary, they were mentioning other women, and in this translation, and in the ones that we read in church now, it's just talking about sort of Mary was there or whatever. But in this case, they were saying, no, it was Mary and this woman and this woman and this woman, and it was multiple women. And so the idea was basically that in older translations of the Bible, there are some indications that women were very prevalent in these stories. And when people are retranslating or putting them through their own sort of filter, they tend to erase these women. And it matters because if it's just one woman, they can kind of be like, oh, it was Mary Magdalene. And then they have lots of ways, and we'll talk more about that. But if you have a whole community of women in this story that actually were there, it just reframes everything about Christianity,
right,
in this way, and where women play a role in it. So it was just a really big discovery that they had found, and it was cool that this pastor had posted it. So that was what kind of started my interest in it, and why I thought it was interesting for us.
Well, with Christmas coming up, you know, we all know the grand old story of the Virgin Mary, and that's why we have Christmas. You know, Mary is pregnant with the God's child, right? That's how the story goes.
Sure, right. She was immaculate conception.
Yep,
right?
Yep, a virgin.
That's why Jesus was so important.
Yep. Because all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I never believed her, but that's sacrilegious. So I grew up very Christian, obviously. I've talked about it a lot. But now, you know, I do kind of struggle with where I stand. I try to be very spiritual. I do believe in God. I personally view the Bible as more of just, you know, a book of morals. And, you know, I get really kind of sad when people really stand by the Bible and quote it and say, no, this is the only way. It's like, yeah, but it's up for interpretation. That's what I believe. But my parents are very religious, and the church that I grew up going to, my parents still go to, and has been very, very wonderful in their lives and in mine. And I'm still friends with the people that I grew up with. But growing up in the church, yes, all we heard was like the Bros Club. You know,
right.
and I remember Jesus Christ Superstar. Like I love that the musical. I love the movie. They always showed the movie every year in Sunday school.
Oh, interesting.
And the way that Mary Magdalene was portrayed is this like dirty whore,
right? And that's definitely the narrative that that she's a prostitute. And that she was sort of this like derelict thing that kind of was like kind of a needy hanger on her. It was like, Jesus, please love me. And he's like, I love everybody.
Right. But we have her. So it's like that. We know these famous Marys. We have her, and then we have the Virgin Mary.
The Virgin Mary. We also have, I mean, other women.
Rebecca, Sarah. And
sure. And also Eve. That's another one that's a big one.
Let's get into Eve. Oh my God.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of, so there's a very specific narrative that I think certain people in the church have wanted to push in terms of what women are about, you know, and they and they use these stories to kind of indicate certain things about how women are. It happens in the Old Testament. It happens in the New Testament. The Old Testament has a lot of crazy shit too, where like the rape of the concubine. I was rereading that story where there's some town, what you know, all these towns out there.
St. Louis. Let's just call it St. Louis.
And the whole premise of I was even reading this conservative woman who was making an argument that the Old Testament is actually very feminist, and I was like, I don't know about that. But she was sort of saying that the story basically is that in this town, there was, I can't remember the whole story, but the point is this guy pushed his concubine out of the door, and then she got raped by all these people. And then like that was sort of the end of the story. And you're like, why is this in the Bible? Like, what does this mean? And she was making the argument that it just shows that this was a town that was going by their own morals and not by God's. And as a result, this is the shit that goes down. So there's a lot of those kinds of stories in the Old Testament. Eve is a story that's from the Old Testament, and we know how that went, right?
Well, she was put on on Earth to serve Adam. Well, to be like Adam's helper.
And aside from that, she in the Bible they say that she came from his rib.
Right.
So she's
created from
Right. They're also she's the reason why sin exists according to the Bible.
Thank you, Satan. Great. Yeah.
She was the one that ratted out with the apple and all that stuff. Remember? I remember also just right now, I went to a very feminist college, Barnard, and I remember doing analysis. And this is part of the thing about the interpretation of it, you know? So the story that they've been telling us is that she was the reason why the downfall
what
of
we
man.
have, right.
She comes from his rib, so she is lesser than him. These are the narratives, right? I remember once taking this class and they were trying to make the argument that there's different ways to interpret these things. And I remember one in particular was when they say that she comes from the rib of Adam, what in some interpretations what that means is that she doesn't come from the head of Adam. She doesn't come from the foot of Adam. She comes from the center of Adam, which means that they're equal.
Interesting.
But if you don't want to interpret it, if you don't want to put it that way, you know, and then there are people that make the argument that we're just not allowing that interpretation to come through.
Right.
So there's a lot of like those things, and a lot of stuff in the Old Testament that says like women are, you know, your property.
Right, your property. They can.
Like that.
You have. Yeah, your husband can rape you anytime.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, all
Great.
crazy
all that
things
sort
like
of stuff. But also the fact that in the Bible, I was reading that, you know, for as many men as there are, like, you know, 1,200 men are spoken of in the Bible or something. Only like 100 women are ever mentioned.
Few.
Like 5% of women are mentioned in the Bible.
Very few.
Which is just, I mean, men wrote the Bible in a patriarchy type system.
Well, and that was the thing too, because I was like just sort of curious about what was going on during this time. And like, yes, indeed, it's true. At the time of that they're speaking of in the Bible, there was a notion that women were lesser, but also slaves. Like they were property of a man.
Owned.
So that was sort of the mentality that all of this is coming from anyway.
So they wrote from what they were experiencing in their lives. And so that is what is in the Bible.
Right.
That makes sense.
Here's what's crazy to me though. So, right. It's what's in their lives. So that's what's in the Bible. Totally. That's logical, whatever, even though it's shitty. What's really interesting to me, especially being a Christian or coming from Christianity.
You were Presbyterian.
I was Presbyterian.
Yeah, me too. Oh my God.
Is all of the New Testament. And the New Testament is about Jesus. That's like what mostly that New Testament is about from what I remember and understand. And all the interpretations of these stories with the women in these stories, like Mary, all the Marys.
all the Marys.
All the Marys. And how these stories have been manipulated. And that there's proof now that they have been manipulated in certain ways to make women continue to look less than. And so we want to talk about some of those examples. One of which you just brought up, which is the Christmas story.
Right.
The Nativity, right? So there are different ways. So she's called the Virgin Mary, right? And so we've based so much of what we live in our religion of Christianity around this idea that she was a virgin.
Right.
Right. And of course,
immaculate conception.
Which already is interesting because it's like, is that the ideal that a woman just like never has sex? A mother should never be sexualized. A mother can never like
this
any of that stuff.
Pristine, wonderful, beautiful woman.
Right.
Virgin Mary. I mean, that is what everyone is.
That's how we think about her.
Right.
And then of course that also makes Jesus feel more special. Then he's not just like a man. He is like the son of God. It's like some
come
sort of
through this woman's womb.
So here's the thing. It turns out that the translation of that word virgin and whatever language it was in also means young woman. And guess who has babies, you guys? Young women.
Young women. Oh my God, wait a minute.
I mean, that kind of is, if you haven't thought about it or if you didn't know, like that changes everything.
No, that definitely changes everything. I feel like I was duped. Like growing up.
And you were. I mean, I think to some degree.
But because also the Virgin Mary story, I mean, you really have to hold on to your purity. That's like the purpose
and they use that. Oh my God.
And they use that
totally
so
use
much
that against you. Yeah.
To save it for marriage.
And think about like that idea that like what an impossible standard that you're supposed to be a mother. All the young women are supposed to grow up and be mothers, but they're not supposed to have sex. I mean, think about what that message is.
Right.
That's insane.
Right.
That's insane.
But also growing up, I was like, that guy Joseph, what a great guy.
Yeah, he stuck by
his woman who I was like, she definitely had sex with somebody else. That's what I'm thinking. Or, but I don't know. This whole story is such a fucking scam. I think. No offense.
No offense. I mean, I think it is a scam. And I think that and even for the sense of making Jesus more than just a person that had some compassion.
Right.
Because I think I do kind of, again, I'm not really, I don't consider myself Christian anymore, but I can definitely get behind the notion that there was a guy named Jesus out there who was spreading a message of love and equality. Yes. And I think that that's really great. And I think that is something we're celebrating and studying and meeting up together and talking about and trying to emulate that. I think that makes sense to me. But to then say that he's more than just a baby that was born, right? You know what I mean? That also is implanting these kind of almost I think unnecessary.
But what better way to listen to this story than to fool everybody?
I just don't. I just don't know why. I mean,
well, it's men. It's men writing the story for people to hear them their clear message of that.
And they've also found that in some translations too that the traditional translation of certain Bible passages, and this is mostly in the New Testament, but that a lot of phrases that have been translated as men and he and all that in truth are more gender neutral. The original word, it can be translated to more mean people and them and not just he. So that makes a really big difference too. And as a person as a woman who's religious and is studying the Bible, if you're reading it every day and it's saying he, him, man, 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 then you don't feel included in those stories. You don't feel included in Jesus' message. You don't feel like you're allowed to be a part of that. When in truth, when it was written, it didn't necessarily say that.
This is making me think of the Constitution of the United States of America right now.
Well, how we're not included in the Constitution.
We're not included.
Women are included. I mean, translations matter,
right?
That is the bottom line here. That these semantics do matter for these things, and it matters so much in the church because the church has ruled people for so long, and they've kind of used the Bible as reasons why women should be inferior to men, why women should be, give in to their man and be, do what your man says. You have to be subordinate. And there's not necessarily the proof that they want to push on us that's even what it said. If you want to go to that point,
Well, it's interesting to me that the Catholic Church still, 2019, will not allow women to be priests,
Right.
And I actually didn't know why that was. And it's because Jesus chose his male disciples.
Right.
So the male disciples, that's why we have male priests and not females.
Right.
But in recent studies, it's actually saying that there were female disciples, Mary Magdalene being the number one.
Right.
And even that something about her name, Magdalene, she was possibly from Magdala, which is Jesus, I guess, gave nicknames to a lot of his disciples. Peter the Rock. I was like, that's amazing.
Jimmy the Coot.
Yeah. But if I was reading something that Mary from Magdala, the city is I guess there's a tower or something. So actually it could be translated that it was Mary Magdala, the tower, and she had such a high ranking amongst her disciples that even in some places that I guess they theorize that Mary was actually Jesus's wife. And that he held her up to the most esteem.
Yeah.
Compared to the other disciples.
That was another thing that I found really interesting because they were saying that there definitely is some theories and the Da Vinci Code. I don't know if you ever read that book.
Oh, yeah, girl.
But he talks a lot about that and that actually Mary was his wife and that they had
children. Right.
So there is that philosophy that it was his wife and that's why she was important. But I think that there's a more interesting story here, which is that what if she wasn't his wife?
Mm-hmm. But just a
disciple.
Just a disciple, yeah.
Just another human being that
and
wanted
the fact that they have to
either make. And so here's the other thing I want to make sure is clear to everybody, which I did not realize. I did not know this until was looking into this. Mary Magdalene is commonly known as a prostitute. Everybody knows her as a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
nowhere in the Bible, not one place in the Bible, does it describe Mary as a prostitute.
What?
She's not a prostitute. It is
That's not what I was taught.
I know it's not what you're taught.
That's crazy.
But if you look at the actual Bible,
the text.
There's no text anywhere saying that she was a prostitute. It says that he absolved her of some sins, but they don't say specifically what it was. It could have been stealing or something or whatever, or like, you know, it could have been lots of things. But there's so much proof that she was an important figure, and she's so prevalent in his story, in Jesus' story, that there's a lot of proof that she was a really important figure for him. And so people either have to make her a prostitute to make her less than, to try to like diminish her. Like, well, she wasn't that important, even though she was clearly very important in the Bible. Or they have to make her a wife because they can't handle the idea of her just being an equal.
A strong, independent woman.
Yeah. And also, the thing about the Magdala thing is, like, if she came from another town, Magdala,
and
she's not
a
normal.
disciple.
Women didn't just leave their homes and go follow a religious leader.
Right.
That was not something women did. She had to be a very independent woman to leave her family and leave her home and go find Jesus and be like, I want to be a part of this. Right. What you're doing is revolutionary, and I'm into it, and I want to like learn from you. And here's the thing that's so cool about Jesus is that he really was.
Oh my God. My mom is going to love this episode.
Yeah. I mean, some people are going to hate it because we're
debunking the Bible.
Some things for sure. But like, one thing that people really are making a big argument for, and there's a lot of proof in the Bible for it, depending on how you translate things. He was a feminist. He kind of came in and he had these radical ideas of his sort of way of living life. And a lot of them revolved around equality. So it was about, we talk about how you should treat poor people well and things like that. People loved that part of the story. But what people don't like to talk about is he also believed that women were equal to men. And that was such a controversial stance at the time, and still to this day is like still controversial. So what they were saying was a lot of people believe that after he died, and then people were continuing to proselytize his message, a lot of these new Christians were very uncomfortable with the idea of a woman being equal. They were like, I don't like that part of the, so what Jesus rewrote said. So they just kind of reinterpreted stuff, and they rewrote it, and they tried to kind of slowly erase these stories. So back to that story about there being multiple women that were disciples or hanging around Jesus, they wanted to minimize that as much as possible. So they took a lot of these women's stories and put them into one woman, which was Mary, as opposed to saying like he could have very possibly had a lot of disciples,
female disciples
that were women. But that also doesn't serve the church very well if they want to say, oh, only men can be priests. You know, because if they're saying that the only reason why men can be priests is because the only disciples that Jesus chose were men, I mean, that's just one more way. And also think about back in the day, the church was very powerful and there was a lot of money in the church. So you were really trying to control who could have that control. And so if you said, well, women aren't, sorry, women, Jesus said you can't do it. So, well, sorry, oops. But that's not what he said.
Right.
There's not really proof that is what he said. And if anything, there's a lot of proof that he was very open to women participating.
Well, do you know, back to the Catholic Church, do you know that they're actually having a decrease of numbers of men wanting to join the church as priests? So they're trying to change, I guess they have changed the law because of the decreased numbers of men joining the church as priests. They're changing it that actually can be married men now.
I have heard about that.
Right?
I think also part of that, though, I think is because of all the pedophilia.
Yes,
because
that
it's
too.
Like clearly there's been a problem.
But they're rewriting the law for married men, but they still will not let women.
Right.
And so there's actually these like suffragettes, like modern day suffragettes that are protesting outside of the Vatican and stuff because they want to be priests.
Yeah.
You're rewriting the Christian law or whatever, so why not be equal?
Yeah, because I think that's a good point, because there's two ways of looking at that. One is that like if you're going to just change it anyway,
right,
then why can't you change it all the way?
Right.
But then the other the way of looking at it is that wasn't even that wasn't even how it actually was.
Right.
It's not, we don't even know for sure that they really were only like male disciples. And that's the other thing that's frustrating. There was this really interesting, there's this like documentary, I think you maybe watched part of it, I didn't watch the whole thing, but it's called Jesus' Female Disciples, The New Evidence. It's a documentary. I don't know. I didn't get through the whole thing. There might be some sort of, I think there's a little bit of conspiracy theory-ness in there. Maybe they kind of pushed it a little. I don't really know. I didn't watch all of it. But there was this interesting thing that they did find that I thought was cool. They found on these two women make this documentary, and they found on their travels about trying to see were women a bigger part of the Bible than we've been led to believe. It's kind of
like an old investigative type. It's really fun. They're like, and now we're going to Israel. Yeah, and they're like British women and they're like in their car.
It's kind of like a fun thing. And I think that they do hit on some important things. Right. And one of the things that they hit on that I thought was interesting is that they go to Naples and they find these series of wall paintings that they were uncovered in 2009, but they're like very old, ancient wall paintings. Mm-hmm. And there's a woman that's depicted in these wall paintings and she's holding the Gospels that are on fire. They're like on as she's standing there. And apparently that imagery was used to indicate that person was a bishop.
Oh,
so
really?
There is more evidence than we realize that says like, no, women were participating in religion and participating in the Bible and participating in Christianity in more ways than we've been letting people believe. So that I think things like that are really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, also there was recent findings of a papyrus.
Papyrus?
Papyrus.
Ah, yes. There you go.
That could be translated that saying that some of the women disciples that were followers of Jesus were actually fronting the cause, paying for the cause. They said resources.
Yeah.
So what if the women were actually paying for Jesus's?
I mean, it's not
campaign.
And if not, like even because I saw that too, and they were like jumping. That's where I was like, are they jumping to the conclusion that resources means money? Because that's like it could be for sure, but it also might be something else. But either way, that they're participating. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? No matter what it is that they're donating in their resources, like that they're participating in this this crazy new religion that was happening.
Well, the fact that the Last Supper, is a beautiful, you picture it in your mind right now, the 12 disciples with Jesus. There's no women there.
No. Also, that painting wasn't made during when Jesus was alive. I think people look at that and they think like that was when someone was sitting and watching it and they painted it during Jesus' time. That was like Da Vinci or who was that? But Da Vinci, it's like much later.
Right.
So of course it's like,
but no women.
Of course not.
Right.
Because by that time, for sure, the story is already like the narrative is already in place.
Right. So, but it's all created just to put women at a lesser value.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've always been this person I tend to be skeptical about these things. And I've always been a believer that, you kind of said this, the Bible can be useful in terms of having morals and having thoughts about this or that. Yeah. But the thing is, I've always felt like, but wait a minute, it's been passed through so many hands. How do we know what's true and what's not, and what was written and what wasn't, and what was originally there and what wasn't? So I kind of was looking into this question of how old is the original Bible?
Scripture?
Yeah, like how, and I found about like the Dead Sea Scrolls, which a lot of you probably have heard of, but these were written like hundreds of years before Christ was born. So that's what a lot of like the Old Testament is based on. So there is actually writings that talk about these things from a very, very long time ago. So there is something that we can draw from and interpret from. And that's why these the interpretations are so important. Mm-hmm. Why the words do matter. Mm-hmm. Because there is actually something that people are going off of, Mm-hmm. But then that being said, your translation that you have, if you have a Bible that's been translated, there's a lot that gets manipulated in that. And unless you're going to go back to the Dead Sea Scroll yourself and
that's what everybody should be reading. Yeah, learn how
whatever, to like then you're at the mercy of of your pastor and of the Pope and of whoever it is that you follow. And that's true for Judaism too, for depending on whatever it is, whatever part of the Bible you are focused on. So I just think that it's worth investigation.
Let's get these women from that documentary. Let's invest more in them because they're
or just
on it.
Or just take it maybe more with a grain of salt. I think that's what's troubling to me too, when people like the Mike Pences of the world that say, well, the Bible says that mother, I can't have dinner with a woman because the Bible says, I don't know what he's thinking, but he's using religion to sort of like put women down.
Right.
And I think that my biggest takeaway is that if you're a Christian, that's not what Jesus said. Mm-hmm. It's just not. Mm-hmm. Sorry. That might be what your minister's telling you, but that's not what is actually in the Bible.
Mm.
My number one takeaway is if somebody can walk away from this podcast today and go like, oh shit, I thought Mary was a prostitute.
Right.
She's not.
No. Just an independent woman.
Yeah.
That's it.
And people don't like that.
And
she's
forbid.
a difficult woman.
Right. Wow.
People don't like that.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you have children, will you make them go to church?
No, 100% not.
Mm-hmm.
No. My parents like sent me to church for a while, and then my mom started.
They would
coming.
just drop. Oh,
yeah,
really?
they would like legit like drop me off at church when I was really little,
and not go themselves.
Nope.
Oh my god! Wow.
And I would like
call your mother.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think in some ways it was just like free babysitting.
Right.
For them.
That's a good point.
But I think honestly, I think that they were kind of going through an uncertainty in their own religious beliefs, but I think that at that time, especially,
they respected what.
Well, they think they were really worried about not giving me an opportunity to decide. I mean, in their mind, if I went to church, then I could decide later if I believed. But I think that they thought they were taking something away from me if they didn't send me to church. And then later, as I got older, my mom started going every Sunday, and we went, and I got confirmed and everything. And so I get it. I mean, I get it. I think that my approach should be a similar mentality, but sort of the opposite, which would be to, look, I don't go to church anymore. I'm not that I don't ever attend, but I don't go to church.
Right.
I don't consider myself a Christian really anymore. So I think I'd be more interested in like having my kids, if they wanted to learn about different religions and then decide what was interesting to them.
Yes.
And I definitely am spiritual, very spiritual, but I don't believe in a God like a guy in the sky. I believe like in the energy and the power of the universe and He-Man. That's what I said.
He-Man,
master of the universe. So that's what I believe in. It's He-Man. Just kidding. Just kidding. But no, but I do. So I think that. Are you gonna go to have when you have kids, or if you have kids? Are you wanting to start going to church again? Like in a consistent basis?
No, I don't think so either. I mean, it was such a huge part of my life growing up. We were forced to go. It wasn't like we had a decision. It was, you had to go. I think the thing that I would like to give my children is that sense of community, and then learning.
I think that's really cool.
Learning religions around the world, and then being able to make a decision for themselves. And I do know that there are churches out there that are more Unitarian, or but just really provide that sense of community.
Yeah.
And learning these lessons, these very valuable lessons that the Bible does teach to your children. I think that could be something I might be interested in, but I mean, I'd rather go for a hike on a Sunday with my family, or
sure. That can be a spiritual experience to like be in touch with nature and things like that. And in some ways, I could argue that it's more spiritual than being locked in a room or whatever when you're
sleeping in a pew.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. That's how I remember church as a. But I mean, I was also in choir, and that's how I learned how to sing and read music. And so I'm very grateful for my experience in the church. But honestly, learning about this right now about young Mary, not Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene, it's like that is what I was taught, and you believe, and you think you know your place, and as a woman, and now we're learning as you get older. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm very pro is Jesus. I mean, honestly, not Jesus the Son of God, but Jesus like the guy, the human being that like spread this message of love. And if you look at all of the the books of the Gospels of Paul and all of them, they basically all say the same thing. It was like he was just like a really loving guy that just sort of thought, hey, we should like take care of each other. Right. That's kind of the whole thing.
And also, I really believe he was an incredible speaker, kind of like Martin Luther King. He was just like, everyone was enamored with him, and that he was really good at gathering a crowd and really being able to teach these lessons.
And I think of him almost the way you think about Buddha. And I would be wanting to teach my kids about the real Jesus, this like real loving Jesus, in the same way I also want them to know about like Buddha and these notions of being present and like Zen sort of stuff, and these things of where it's all about just being chill, you know what I mean? And taking care of it, being nice to each other, and it's not about greed. It's not about, there's so much overlap. That's a whole other thing, but there's so much overlap with the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of Buddha. There's so much. And people don't like to hear that. They don't believe in it. They don't know what I'm talking about. But so much of it has to do with, that and when he says like, I'm the Son of God, there's an argument that people are saying that what he really means is that we are all the Son of God. We are all, we're all God's children, but we're equally so. It's not, Jesus wasn't above us. He was just saying like, we are God. There is no man in the sky. There is us. This is, this is it. This is our life. We are, if you're present and you don't have to suffer. There's all these things about suffering within Jesus's teachings too, that are very much in line with Buddhist teachings about suffering and how suffering kind of comes from within and not from external factors, all that stuff. But so I'm very like into that stuff. And I would definitely be interested in, talking to my kids about that. But then I wouldn't be encouraging them necessarily to become a certain denomination.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just want to teach them to make their own.
And then and if there was something that moved them and they wanted to do that, then that's fine.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing I want to leave you all with. I find this very funny. So I guess there are some ways you can translate in the Bible that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene.
Oh, I saw something about that.
And then I guess recently they found more papyrus. I can't say this name.
Papyrus?
Papyrus?
Yeah.
The old paper?
Yeah. Just some old paper.
Old paper. They found more scripture or whatever, but it said Jesus would they translated it. Jesus would often kiss Mary on and then it was ripped.
And they couldn't read it.
And they couldn't read it. And I was like, on the booty, on the butthole, on the puss, but no, mouth probably. But
it could have been feet though.
Feet?
Think of like how much that changes.
Oh my God,
everything.
I love a man's mouth on my feet. Oh God, yum, yum. Anyway, I just think that's funny. So it's up to interpretation, you guys. Jesus would kiss Mary often on the blank. You decide.
It's like a Mad Libs. It's just like Bible Mad Libs.
But I mean, we didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know
I
that.
do think that some of this stuff, though, is going to come to light more and more. And I think it's really exciting. And if you're a theologian and you're into theology, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening because now there's all these like X-ray sort of 3D image things where we can look into some of these older pieces of papyrus, old paper that you couldn't, they were so gentle you couldn't open them without destroying them. So but now you can do this imaging thing where you can look kind of through it and they're actually able to read all these things that they were not able to read forever. So that's really cool because there might be stuff that comes out where we're
but that's the crazy thing when you think about it,
these notions about
if everything can be debunked, but then where would millions of Christians go? I
think that's a really,
they might have even figured it out now, but they're afraid to actually say.
I think that's very possible.
Yeah.
And I think, certainly way back in the day, there were people that knew what they were doing when they were when they started calling Mary a prostitute. Mm-hmm. They knew that there was no proof of that in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Somebody started that rumor, but there's no proof of it. And so many people that are religious never read the Bible.
Right.
They consider themselves Christian. They don't even bother to read it themselves. And I think that's, I don't know, that conservative woman that was sort of trying to make the argument that the Bible's a feminist work of writing. She did say something about how in the Bible it says a woman should be subordinate to her husband. And she was saying, and I believe that because the Bible says it. But then also she makes the point, and I think that this is a good point. She's like, but the Bible also says that man should be subordinate to God. And she's like, and I think we have a really big problem when you have religious leaders that are telling you need to be subordinate to me, but then aren't being subordinate to God. And that is a very common thing in some of these quote unquote religion. I don't even consider them Christians, to be honest with you. People that don't that are just manipulating people. And that's mostly what Christianity is, in my opinion. I know, unfortunately. A lot of hypocrites. I've been to some wonderful churches that are wonderful, and they do not spread that message, that are spreading a real message of love, and I think that that's lovely, and that's really wonderful. And I know that there's a lot of good churches like that, but there's a lot that aren't.
There are, yeah.
Woo, send us emails. I know people might get mad. Guys. Send us an email at difficultwomen at podcast. No, what is it? Difficult Women Podcast.
difficultwomen@gmail.com.
Oh, speaking of the Bible, we forgot to mention something.
Oh my God,
really
the most important people in our lives right now.
Yes,
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve. That's
absolutely
right. AdamandEve.com.
And it just happens to be a website.
Take a look or listen. I guess I'll listen. Free stuff is awesome, but free stuff to spice up your bedroom is even better.
Select almost any one item for 50% off, and then Adam and Eve loads on the free stuff.
Enter offer code HORIO at checkout and get 10 tantalizing free gifts.
A sexy item for him, a special gift for her, and a third item you'll both enjoy.
And 6 free spicy movies.
Ooh. Plus, free shipping.
That's HOREO, WHOREO, HOREO at adamandeve.com.
Take a look.
I don't know. It's a podcast. With your inner eye. It's being back to like other religions.
Oh, I do have to say, I put lube in the Satisfier.
Oh yeah.
Then it made a whole other weird sound.
Like
I don't know.
Sound.
It was like,
but did it feel better?
Yeah,
I tried it with some lube and it was better. I think that I got to work on it.
Yeah,
I work on my technique.
It's just so loud. I don't know why it's so loud.
Well, maybe.
I was trying to use it with my man the other day, and it's just so. He was like, "Is that normal?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but it's scaring me because it's right by my
hoo-ha."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, praise God! I said it a couple of times that night. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right,
Virgin Marie. Anyway, I hope this is interesting. We may have ruffled some feathers. I'd be so interested to know what you think, or if this is all stuff you already knew, or if there was anything you learned today. I know we learned a couple things.
Yep, I did.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Bye.
Bum, 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 bum. We'll tell you a tale of holiday woe. It happened to Jen Smith just 1 year ago. December 25th with her parents she'd spend, but the night before Christmas she went out with friends. Bum, bum, bum. They went to a bar and got totally sloshed. But who did she see but her ex-boyfriend Josh? In high school he looked just like Ryan Gosling, but now he was fugly and balding. She worried if they hooked up it'd be so corny, but that night Jen Smith was real horny. He took her back to his bachelor pad, which was the basement of his mom and dad. Dum, 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 dum. When he was a young man, he came hard and quick. That night, not so much, cause he had not so much, cause they passed out at 4, cause Josh passed out at 4, cause the next morning Jen had 70 missed calls from her father. 70 missed calls from her father. Dum, 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 dum. Quick like St. Nick, she arose with a clatter, and just when you thought that things couldn't get sadder, Jen made it home but ruined Christmas Day. She let down her family and puked in the foyer. Take heed, don't make all the mistakes that Jen made. Drink in moderation and try to behave. When visiting home with your folks this Noel, unless you're sure you'll get laid, then go party like